It was my idea, and then I took it to my wife, Wendy, who also participated in the book, and we both kind of decided that, yeah, this is something we should do or need to do.
I go to the movies every week. I'll probably wait for you. That's interesting, but at the same time. Yeah, I'm setting my drink right here, so don't knock my drink over. I'll wait. She's getting all her stuff right now.
I'm co-curator and co-editor on the book for Where We Live, and I participated in some of the illustration, wrote the introduction, but me and my wife, Wendy, were the progenitors of the project and helped bring together a lot of the contributors that participated in the project.
We call Vegas home, and we have such a connection to this area, and we know many of the people that were on lockdown on the Strip, and I think just as humans we wanted to help, you know, and through this book we found we knew that we could do something unique to help people that not only could raise money but also say something about the issues surrounding it.
I wrote a story about my wife, who was a first responder. She's a nurse at a local hospital in the ER, and I tell my story of how we got the call in the evening of the shooting. We had been watching actually on Facebook Live and on the news, and then her phone rang, and it was her boss at the ER saying they were calling everyone in. And so my story that I wrote was kind of having to let my wife leave, not knowing what she was heading towards, and knowing that nothing good would be what she was heading towards. And she worked the ER that entire night and saw atrocities, some terrible, terrible things. So
I actually wrote a story in this book called Contacts. The story was actually inspired by an experience I had with a friend of mine. He actually works on the Strip, and what had happened was during that night I couldn't get a hold of him, and of course I was on my phone most of that night. A lot of my friends were marking themselves as safe, like on Facebook and all that. I was getting texts and tweets from people, you know, and I just saw my phone blowing up, and that's when I started seeing all the stuff, and I just started contacting people. I had a couple friends on the Strip. They were safe. I couldn't get a hold of one friend. I mean, it turns out he actually took the day off, so he wasn't there. He had just been sleeping through most of it. And so that's kind of what inspired me to write the story.
My writing, it's a story about that takes place during the Revolutionary War, and I'm just comparing the fact that back when the Constitution was written and the Second Amendment was added to the Constitution, which actually happened later, but if you could reload your gun in your single-shot musket in 20 seconds, you're the deadliest man in the territory. So the fact that the amendment may be a little bit outdated in terms of assault weapons and how quickly and easily it is for hundreds of bullets to leave the barrel of a gun, as opposed to how it used to be. And maybe we should be rethinking our laws.
And I contributed a poem to the book. It's about the moment of loss and how someone you love can just become a memory. And in my poem, I talk about, you've become a hologram from a place I cannot reach. And that's kind of how memory seems like to me, that, you have this hologram in your mind of the person that you used to know or used to love, or you still love, but, they used to be in your life.
A full description of the book is there's nonfiction and fiction, but a lot of the material is accurately described as being retelling eyewitness accounts or other creators that wanted to contribute, telling a personal story about their own relationship with gun violence or guns in their past. But there also is some allegorical content that is definitely fictional, that speaks to some sort of underlying message. And we felt like it was a good idea to have a good mix like that to bring people's attention to the issue in various ways. There's also poetry and essays in the book too. So there's some material in there that are from local journalists who've covered the subject, which is, I think, something you don't see very often in a book like this.
We knew kind of the tone that we wanted to take, that we didn't want anything reactionary. We wanted things that were thoughtful, and tried to cover as many aspects around the issue and around our city. And I wanted people to see the city as something beyond, debauchery incorporated, which is kind of how the rest of the country sees Las Vegas, but that there's this huge community here, and there's families living here, and it's just like any other city. And I wanted to humanize that. Kind of tried to figure out a good flow. So we kind of tried to do a few stories and then a witness story. This is who this is about, and then go on to other things that might be fiction or allegory or about the history of the Second Amendment or whatever it was, and then get back to a witness story. This is who this is about. And so we were very mindful of how the flow of the book went.
I did contribute maybe 11 to 12 pages of material for art. So because of that, our job was to find, like some of the eyewitnesses and so forth who wanted to participate, is to find other writers and artists who were able to tell their story. And that process was us talking to those people and kind of hearing what they had to say, and then finding the right person that we think could tell that story for them.
Well, it's a big deal for someone like me. I was born and raised in Las Vegas, and because you hear about all the stuff going on in the world, and it's just really weird when it happens, relatively close to you. And I'm really proud to be a part of this project. Yeah, I'm really happy that this book exists. I'm surprised something like it hasn't happened, before. But now that it's here, we have it.
It's a very heartrending and difficult book to read all the way through, because there's so much sort of pain and sadness attached to some of these stories. But I'm very happy with the people I work with and the artists, and it was a very satisfying experience, even though it was a experience that was, or a piece of work that was inspired by the horrible events that happened in Vegas. I hope at the very least lots of people buy the book. That in turn makes money, which goes to the charity to help all these poor people who are now in debt because of the fact that they were shot. That the medical system, I guess, is also sort of something you have to think about. In that now, if you get shot, it means you could lose your house. So that's so. I hope that it makes money for the victims, and I hope that they benefit from it.
When you mention comic books to anyone in the general public, their first thoughts are like Batman and Superman and Spider-Man, and that will probably surprise them that comics do this sort of content. What goes on behind gun violence beyond the statistics. It's about people, and that's one thing I think gets kind of forgotten in the news cycle, is how these issues sort of just become one statistic after another, when it's actually people's lives. Not just those who died, but those who've been affected and are still living and will have to deal how they come to terms with that for the rest of their lives. I think that's something that is important for people to see, and these stories can get to the heart of that.
It's never a time to talk about it, apparently. We can never talk about it, but art doesn't need to talk about it. Art stands on its own and allows the viewer to think about it. And then, I think this book will start conversations, and hopefully those conversations will lead people to act and to do more on the subject of this. I feel that comics can tell any story, that they're like any genre, that it can tell amazing stories, and it does.
Comics are so much more diverse than that, and they can talk about such compelling issues in such a unique way. And the fact that I could expose the world to the power of what comics can do, and that, you know, everybody that contributed gave 100%. Everything was so thoughtful. All the artwork was so well done. I'm so proud of that, and you know, that people get to see the potential of comics. I think it's, you know, this great side effect of what we tried to do.